name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Chaotic Risk Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticrisk.com. Our special guest tonight is bassist Chris Catero with the band Blacklight Acoustic Conspiracy. Welcome to the show tonight, Chris.
Thanks for having me on, bud.
Yeah, now I understand you're based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I understand you're also a founding member, Chris. And so, for people who've never heard about your band, why don't you? Obviously, you guys are an acoustic act. Now, were you initially an acoustic act, or did you just start out as a cover band, and then you came up with the idea for the band, or what was the process here?
It kind of actually happened as kind of a weird happenstance. My original band at the time was a band called Razor. Was scheduled to do open an acoustic show for a place here in Phoenix called Rock Bar that a friend of mine happens to be a co-owner on.
Okay.
And the singer in the band ended up kind of canceling from doing the gig on a couple days' notice.
Wow.
So what ends up happening is I play in a bunch of different acts.
Okay.
One of the acts that I had been playing with was a kind of like a casino Ozzy Tribute kind of act.
Oh, wow.
And the singer and the guitar player are good friends of mine, and they're really versatile musicians. And I just said, hey guys, I'm kind of got my, I'm up against the wall here trying to cover a gig. I don't want to leave these guys hanging. Do you think you guys would want to let's throw together like 8 songs from the Ozzy Tribute? Let's try it. And they go, well, sure. Well, why not? Let's go do it. And what ended up happening was, we had 2 days to figure it out, and me and the guitar player sat down and goes, well, okay, Ozzy's never done any of these acoustic, and a lot of that material isn't conducive to just being played on an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So we kind of had a quick brainstorming session at my house, and we started going over potential ideas of how we could, do these songs acoustically, and I said, well, there's no acoustic versions of these, so it's kind of carte blanche. We can just go in our own direction on any of these, and I don't think anybody's going to care. We're just trying to cover the gig. But as soon as we started doing it, we went, wow, these are kind of interesting what we're doing here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like we just kind of. It's kind of that fun little role of saying, well, if I was the producer and I got to rewrite these, what would I do?
A perfect example of that is I heard your version of War Pigs, which is, Tony. Pretty much anything Tony Iommi does is, pretty metal based. So to take War Pigs from what it originally was and to make it into what you guys have made it, it's almost like a totally different song.
Yeah, and that was kind of that's kind of what we did with it. The funny thing with it was when we went and actually did the gig 2 days later, we were playing these songs, and we played maybe, 3 or 4 songs in, and the audience was just kind of watching us. And this place was a bar, oftentimes we play bar, a lot of bar chatter. It's the nature of when you play bars. This place was dead silent. Everybody was watching, and Kevin, our singer, looked over at me kind of under his breath. He goes, I think these guys hate us. I go, no, I actually think the audience is just watching. And midway through the set, the place was going nuts. And afterwards, we had the bar owner came up to me and goes, dude, that was awesome.
Wow.
Can you do that again?
Wow.
And other people were saying, hey, do you have any recordings of these songs, of the versions you did? And of course, the light bulb kind of went on.
Yeah.
We thought, wow, I think we stumbled onto something cool without really knowing it. So we ended up, that kind of was the launching point where we decided we were going to go ahead and try to record some of the songs. And we didn't really have aspirations of making an acoustic band out of it first.
Well, it's funny. Things kind of happen accidentally like that. Sometimes it's a pretty cool thing,
Oh yeah, it's complete happenstance, man. And we decided we were going to go ahead and record some of the versions that we had done, and we got probably about a quarter of a way into recording them, and I kind of looked at everybody, and said, you know what, guys, this is a whole different band. We could do this with all sorts of bands that we love. And just go, completely left field and do these crazy versions of stuff. And so that's what we did. And it's kind of catching on. It's a funny thing, man. We've only played a couple of gigs with the band at this point. The rest of this year is looking to be pretty busy. I think we're going to have a lot of bookings. But the audience reaction already has been like, wow, you guys are, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
It's just kind of a unique thing because we're not really, we're doing covers, but these aren't
your typical covers. And see, to me, like when I went on and I found your guys' Facebook page, I went on your YouTube channel, that's what, a lot of times people, they will like kind of, when they hear about tribute bands and cover bands, they'll kind of knock it and be like, these are just failed musicians that couldn't, make it doing their own thing. But that's the thing too, because like when you look at the tribute band scene, I kind of look at it, even the cover bands, I kind of look at it as rock and roll theater in the sense that, there's half a dozen, like Kiss and Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin tributes already. So if you're going to compete in that kind of a market, you got to have something special to offer, which you guys definitely do,
Oh, yeah. And for us, we didn't really, it was a for fun thing for us.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's a for fun thing for us. All of us do other things as well. I'm a pretty busy bass player and a producer and things like that. And this is really just like the fun gig to go do, but it's just turning into something that's, our fun gig is turning into something.
See, that's cool then, too, when it's not necessarily just work all the time, that you can, your job or your work, so to speak, becomes a very thing that you enjoy doing, that makes it much more entertaining, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. And all the guys in the band, we've all got kind of storied histories in music. We've all done things.
Of course.
For this, this was really just us having kind of a good time, but it's been really interesting because it's a lot like when we're creating this stuff and producing the record, the recordings and whatnot, it's really a lot like doing an original composition, except you've been given a blueprint.
Yeah.
Here's a basic structure. Go nuts.
Yeah, but the thing of it, when you think of like Unplugged, like talking about metal bands, okay, people have heard like Alice in Chains do Unplugged. People have heard Nirvana, but you don't typically think of like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest Unplugged. If you know what I mean. And now you start out, you're saying like it's an Ozzy tribute, and now I've seen you guys have also done some other covers, like you had the Zoo by the Scorpions. I thought, man, what a cool rendition of that. I heard your version of Hellion Electric Eye. So, you guys are branching out. That's a cool thing in itself,
Yeah, well, that was the thing that when we kind of got going with it, it's been the intentions all along. It's a funny thing. We kind of, if there's such a thing, we kind of had a soft opening.
Yeah.
Earlier in the fall of 2018, this past year. But the whole intention is that we were going to be doing songs all over the map.
Yeah.
And really, that's what it's all about for us. We're going to be doing tunes that range from the 70s to even some modern stuff that's just completely twisted and different.
Wow. Now let me ask you, Chris, when you guys started out as an Ozzy tribute, did you strictly did you just do one era of Ozzy music? Like I know you did Black Sabbath and Ozzy, but did you do, for example, the Randy Rhoads era, the Jakey Lee era, the Zakk Wylde era? Did you kind of cover it all?
The Kevin Schumacher, the singer in Blacklight, I was kind of brought in really late in all of that.
Okay.
The drummer recommended me in because the drummer and I played in original bands together.
Okay.
And what it came down to was Kevin's probably, as far as going as a tribute guy, is probably the best Ozzy impersonator I'd ever seen.
Okay.
He naturally looks and sounds like him. So you're already halfway home.
Yeah.
You're going to do Ozzy impersonations. But one of the things that kind of clued me in, Kevin's is an immense singer. He can do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
He's got like a theatrical background, and he's a very trained singer. Grew up in the San Diego area.
Okay.
And when I first got a clue of what he could really do, we would be, you know, the Ozzy Tribute was just, it's a money-making thing.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's for fun, you know what
I
mean?
Yeah.
But he would start singing the songs kind of like himself versus mimicking a voice just out of boredom sometimes in a rehearsal. And I'd always look, I go, man, you've got a really powerful voice. And he's like, yeah, you know, you should hear me do some things. Well, when we did that little acoustic gig on the fly, I told Kevin, I said, just sing it like you.
Yeah,
Don't worry about trying to sound like Ozzy. Just do it. And man, it was like, wow, he really has this crazy wide range where he can go into this really cool baritone voice.
Yeah.
And then he's got like serious register and, you know, upper mid-range things. And it's just a really quality voice that, you know, you don't hear a lot of.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in the music business for years and years and years, and really, really good singers aren't very easy to come by.
Well, yeah, and you know, not to lump you guys in with the tribute bands and that, but you know, it's amazing depending where you're from, because even like here in Los Angeles, where I'm from, there's been a pretty big tribute scene. You know, almost to the point where we have an all-female tribute to Iron Maiden out here called the Iron Maidens, and I tell you, it's amazing. That band, they have taken, you know, like around the world. They've done gigs like in Russia, Mexico, you know, and just not just in the U.S. So, you know, if you have a talent, you know, tribute bands are big business these days. But you know, another interesting thing about you guys starting out as an Ozzy tribute is what a lot of Ozzy fans may or may not realize is, like, when you're doing, you know, the old Black Sabbath stuff and the solo stuff, a lot of it's, even though Ozzy's singing it all, you know, he's a singer and everything. A lot of that stuff sounds different, and I think as a musician that'd be cool, because really Ozzy isn't much of a songwriter. Like the Black Sabbath stuff, most of that classic stuff was written by Geezer Butler, and then he had other guys, you know, in his solo band that were songwriters. So that's why a lot of that sound, even though Ozzy's singing it all, it doesn't always sound the same.
No, not at all, man. And that's the interesting thing when you start covering a lot of that kind of material and you're going around it, you're doing different things with it, and it's kind of a little bit of a tip of the cap to Ozzy in certain ways, because, you know, a lot of people don't give Ozzy a lot of credit for actual vocals. He's a little bit more of a character. He's got a very unique voice. It's very, you know, nobody can no other singers really sound like him, but he actually has some really interesting lines that either him or Geezer came up with in the Sabbath, and himself in his you know,
delivery. So, definitely.
So there's a lot of it's a really musical, like that material is really, really musical.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, the bass playing, the guitar playing, the vocal lines, there's a lot of thought that were put into it, and it makes an interesting thing where when you try to dissect it and you're going to change things around and you're going to, you know, go from a power chord riff to now you're doing this finger picking thing on an acoustic. It shows you how musical those songs really are.
Yeah, and I was curious, are you more of a fan of the solo material, the Black Sabbath material, or do you kind of just love it all?
I love it all. I'm a big music fan in general of lots of eras, and honestly, when it comes to like Black Sabbath, if I'm to be truthful, my favorite Black Sabbath is the Dio years.
It's funny you say that, because I was going to ask you that. You know, I'm kind of right there with you, because I love a lot of that classic Black Sabbath stuff, but you know, a lot of people thought Sabbath was going to die when Ozzy was let go by the band, but you know, they went on to, you know, greater success with Dio. I mean, and the interesting thing about Dio, even though the sound of the band alternately, you know, was drastically different, you had a guy that came in and he really just, he's a great songwriter. You know, he wrote about, you know, demons and dragons, and they just took it to the next level, which, I mean, I never forget hearing the song Neon Nights for the very first time, and That's one of my all-time, favorite Dio era tracks from Sabbath. And Heaven and Hell, I mean, you just can't go wrong with any of the songs on that album.
No, absolutely not. I wouldn't be shocked if at some point we're doing a Blacklight version of one of those songs.
Yeah.
We're all massive fans of that era.
And then, let me ask you now, you mentioned that you've got quite an experience as a producer as well, so when you guys go in to record these tracks, like I know you do have a CD out, it features Sabbath and Ozzy solo stuff, it's called Reborn. Like when you went in and recorded those tunes, I was curious, was everybody in the same studio together, like recording as a live band, or were they recorded at your gigs, or how are the songs tracked?
Well, it was kind of a unique thing. I have like a smaller home tracking studio where I do mostly overdubs and mixing type of stuff. But in this case, because you're dealing with very sparse percussion, so we did everything here in my home studio. And one of the interesting things that went down with this was we kind of knew what we were going to do with the songs, but we made a lot of it up as
we went. Wow.
so this was what made this kind of interesting was we'd start with our guitarist Michael Ennis and I would come up with these arrangements, and we started with Mike, and Mike is an amazing acoustic guitar player. He's got great ideas of how to spin things differently to an acoustic.
Yeah.
And so we were just kind of literally click track up in and just kind of saying, okay, well, how do you want to do this part? What do you think about this? And we just spitballed. And we were like, sure, sounds good, moving on. I mean, it was really kind of an organic thing. When we put the percussion in, it was spur of the moment. We didn't overthink it. We literally just, what do you think? Oh, yeah, it sounds good. Let's do that. I did it again then with the bass. Wow. I had to go back. The funniest part of that record was I had to go back. All of us did, really. Had to go back and relearn what we did. Wow. It was in the moment.
Wow. And I was curious, like, when you guys were recording, were you shooting any video, like, of the recording?
We shot a little bit that I have, which will end up coming up onto our site at some point. Actually, our singer's wife shot a bit of it. The funniest part of it is we were still just like, oh, this is for fun.
Yeah.
We're just doing this. I mean, I'm not one. I have to. Obviously, you're a musician. You have to promote yourself online and think what you do. But that really wasn't what this was about.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean? It was coming from a really pure place, I think.
Yeah.
We're just having fun. And we're like, wow, listen how rad these tunes are turning out. It was really when we started getting the vocals down with Kevin and even Kevin. It was the same process with Kevin, because he would try to do things, and I would suggest stuff like, dude, try singing it like this. He goes, I've never sang like that before. Let's give it a shot. And I went, whoa, check that out. I can do that. It was that kind of an experience. Yeah,
the cool thing about something like this is, like you said, it started out, as something fun. It started out just like a fun idea. You didn't really have the idea to take it to this point. It just kind of automatically went there. Now, let me ask you, so from the time you guys did the first gig, to recording the CD and that, how did the idea come? Did it first come up with the idea of like, hey, let's try to post some of these songs online and kind of see what reaction we get? Or did you have people right away that would hear this stuff tell you, hey man, you guys should really make a CD, or you should take this to the next step, or at least put it up on YouTube and see how people react to it?
Yeah, we kind of, I think from the gig that night, the reaction was so strong. That initial first jam gig we did with this was so strong that we all, once we decided we were going to record some songs, and we kind of said, okay, this is going to be a band, we knew we were probably going to have a good reaction. I popped it over to some, as we were going through it, I popped it over to some of the guys who I've worked with. Like, one of the guys is, I play bass in Wild Mick Brown from Dokken. I play in his band.
Oh, wow.
So Mick loved it. Mick's like, oh my God, I can't, this shit is awesome. And I'm thinking, okay. And my, one of my really good friends and a production partner of mine is Alan Niven, who was the manager of Guns N' Roses and Great White's manager-producer for all those years.
Wow.
And Alan is a great poo-pooer of all things.
Yeah.
If you can make Alan kind of, go, wow, that's great, you've achieved something.
Wow.
And I remember sending him the version of Paranoid, and he came back and goes, that was stunning. And I was like, wow, okay, so I guess we're on the right path here.
Yeah, I got to ask, speaking of a guy like Alan Nevin, how did you initially hook up with him?
I used to, at one point, was the artist relations marketing head at Crank Amplification.
Oh, okay, wow.
And with Crank, Alan had hit me up about an artist that he'd been working with who was looking for a guitar amp endorsement.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And that's how I met Alan, and then we kind of we found out we were pretty much kindred spirits from the word go, and Alan and I started working together on projects. We first started on my original band at the time, Razor, but since then we've done quite a few things together, and he's a really, really good friend of mine. We talk almost daily. He's fun to do production with. Wow. Because he's just probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met in the music business. He's legitimately, you understand when you meet him how Guns N' Roses became as big as they did with the bunch of rebel rousers that those guys were.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing thing. You bring up a band like Guns N' Roses. I mean, three of original members that are back together, which I don't think anybody ever thought they would get. I mean, just even maybe 3 to 5 years ago, people thought that Slash and Axl would never play together again. But it's amazing that those guys are back doing it together again.
That's why I guess you never say never, right?
Yeah. Now let me ask you now. How long was it from the first gig till you guys recorded, the CD that you have out now, and how long did that take you to record all those songs?
We didn't jump into it right away, but we had the idea, so we ended up kind of jumping into it a few months later, and then we just took our time with the recording of the record. We weren't in any hurry because we weren't going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just kind of our thing to do for fun. We kind of knew we were going to have a really cool project out of it, and that would most likely be popular to book and things like that. We just took our time with it. We weren't in a giant hurry.
I hear you.
We'd get together a couple times a week here at my studio and record, and that's how it would go. And it wasn't until when really we got done with the record and I started popping it to some people who I know in the business, and we were getting such really, really strong feedback that we started kind of going a little bit more business-like with it.
Oh, okay. Now, let me ask you, Chris, because again, I've always been a fan of acoustic music, like stuff that Alice in Chains and bands like that have put out. And the thing of it is like a lot of these bands say how, people say, oh, you guys should go do an acoustic show. You put out a great acoustic CD. A lot of these bands go on the record saying, yeah, but you don't realize just how expensive it is to take an acoustic show on the road. Has that been your experience? Like, is it that much more difficult, would you agree, to do one of these acoustic shows versus a typical electric rock show?
Actually, in my world, I'm the dude has a bass player who drags around the refrigerators and massive backline to gigs and things like that, or that's on my backline requirements for flight dates or whatnot. With this, it's actually a lot more stripped down. To a certain extent, I get to show up with, I use these really cool Epiphone Jack Cassidy semi-hollow basses on this gig. Okay. And I show up with that and a little pedal board, and we're good to go. And it's kind of fun, you're sitting in a stool as opposed to me, bouncing off the walls on stage like I normally would be.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of a neat challenge in that too, in getting the same emotional vibe across while sitting in a chair. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's easy to just like go batshit crazy and throw down, and everybody goes, yeah. You know, when you can actually come across in a more subtle way on these acoustic things, it's kind of a interesting challenge, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and then you know, I would think too, being an acoustic-based band, that that opens up the opportunity for you guys to be able to play with a lot more, say, diverse acts than you would if you were, say, like the typical Ozzy Tribute still, you know?
Oh, for sure, because one of the things that we realize, like, because, you know, as we're expanding our repertoire within the band, it's going to go beyond even just doing classic rock stuff. There's a bunch of really cool songs that we can do that may not be, you know, exactly that type of genre.
Yeah.
But when you do all of these together on acoustics, all those songs just run together in a really nice flow. Yeah. Like we could do a complete pop song that we've taken and done in some kind of dark, moody way on acoustic, and put it right next to, like you said, like War Pigs or Mr. Crowley or, you know, or Hellion Electric Eye, and no one, the audience won't really. It's a very seamless transition because it's all acoustic. Yeah,
because, you know, I gotta say, before, you know, speaking to you today, I went on your YouTube channel and I was listening to the Hellion Electric Eye, and you can no doubt tell, you know, that's the song it is, but kind of like you're saying, it's a different new arrangement. And now let me ask you, in regards to that, like, when you guys released that, obviously, you know, Judas Priest are the ones that wrote the song, but being that it's a new arrangement, do you get any kind of songwriting credit as far as the music and all that? Or is it strictly licensed to, you know, like Judas Priest?
Usually those kind of things, you do a license on it. You can take a piece because if you drastically rearrange something.
Yeah.
You can be paid on that for that, but typically with these kind of things, it's you're basically getting the licenses to do covers.
Yeah,
it's a funny thing. We live in a time when covers are really a big deal for an important aspect in breaking all kinds of bands now.
Yeah, I mean,
because and you know, I'm kind of a rock music historian. I'm one of those nerds. I've got record collections.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I know things in my brain that I have no business knowing, you know, remembering. But as kind of a student of that, you know, we're really looking at, in today's date, you know, 60 years of rock music.
Yeah.
That it's hard to compete with that kind of a back catalog. If you think about it, in the early 80s, when a lot of these bands in 70s, when they were coming out, they weren't competing against anything. Yeah. It was like free flow, you know, all this stuff was new.
Yeah.
And fast forward to today, it's really hard to do anything that sounds new.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because, I mean, as long as I've been alive anyways, that's always been the thing in the music industry, that a lot of bands, they get known for, like, you know, maybe their first big hit is like a cover of somebody else's tune. I mean, you even take a band like the Dead Daisies, great new band that's up and coming the last several years. You know, it's got John Corabi and Doug Aldridge and all these 80 rock guys. And the thing about it is, they've even become known for, like, every time you put an album up, they got at least one or two covers. You know, like they got a Rolling Stones cover and a Beatles cover on their latest album. And the thing of it is they kind of they do a great job of paying respect to their, you know, to their heroes and that, but kind of making the songs their own. And I mean, you take a band like Quiet Riot, outside of Metal Health, probably their two best, biggest hits were covers of Slade songs. And you know, I was talking to Frankie Benelli a couple years back, and he was telling me, you know, Quiet Riot, we got the fame for those songs, but Slade, they got all the money.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. And
you know, it is true though. With the thing with the covers is it's a familiar thing to people.
Yeah.
It's a song that people already love. So, you know, like in our case, what we're doing, if you can cleverly do a song, you know, that is familiar to somebody, but in a way they've never ever heard it before.
Yeah,
that's kind of a thing all into its own, and that's one of the things I got to say to the guys in the band. We kind of have we didn't mean to do it, but we have a little in actually being able to do that and coming up with interesting ways of presenting something familiar.
I got to be honest with you, Chris. That's part of the reason I reached out to you to do this interview, because when I asked it, I just I was looking for bands on Facebook and stuff, and I accidentally came across your guys' Facebook page, and I thought after I was reading up on you guys and kind of what the concept of the band is, I thought, wow, what? And then after reading, I thought, okay, I'm going to check out some of the music. Went on the YouTube. Thought, wow, what an original concept! And that's kind of initially what my thought was after hearing like War Pigs and some of the other stuff you have online there. I thought, man, I've heard this song countless times, but never like this. This is really a fresh thing they got.
Well, thanks, man. And that's our goal. Like, I love hearing that, because that is truly our goal in the band, is to come up with stuff where people go, wow, never heard it like that before.
Yeah.
Good. That's what we're trying to do.
And now let me ask you, as far as when you guys went in and recorded, the CD and that, or those tracks, how do you come up with the set list, or which songs you're gonna? Does everybody kind of get a vote? Does everybody kind of say, hey, this is my favorite Ozzy tune, this is what I want to record, or what was that process like?
It's really democratic. We all kind of come up and do some things. A couple of the guys in the band are less opinionated about it. Our other guitar player, Fate Taylor, and our percussionist is named Gary Sanchez. They're a little less particular, I think, about what we're doing, and they leave it to Kevin, Mike, and myself to pick a lot of the songs. But really what it comes down to when we're doing song selections for trying to do this, it comes down to what, number one, and this kind of goes from a production standpoint is one of the big rules, is do what you can do well.
Yeah, okay? Let's stick with it.
And it starts, for us, it starts with Kevin. If it's something we know Kevin is going to just kill from a vocal performance, that's the starting thing. And then the next aspect, which this is where it gets a little trickier, is Mike and I come up with, okay, how do we make this song sound different from its original?
Uh-huh.
And sometimes there's some start and stop things of this. You start in on a song, you start working on it, and you go like, we're just not taking it far enough, and I don't know that we can. And so you may abandon that particular song and move on to something else.
Yeah. Wow. And again, I'm not a musician.
The other kind of part of our criteria is if it's already an acoustic song, shut it already.
Wow. And like I say, I'm not a musician myself. I'm more of a music fan here, but I was curious, as a musician, from your point of view, Chris, like when you go in and you're recording these tunes, I'm sure you've played these tunes before and jammed on them, but as a bass player, is it drastically different doing acoustically versus, say, the typical electrical version?
Yeah, that's a good question, because as a bass player, as bass players in general, you're the glue.
Yeah.
You're the glue between the drums, percussion, and the guitars and the vocals and whatnot. And when you start doing acoustic stuff, you tend to, at least for me, the role changed, because I have to fill up a lot more space underneath than I would say if it's an electric thing.
Wow.
There's a lot of harmonic territory that becomes very clear and empty on an acoustic.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I'm kind of a 70s style bass player to begin with. I'm a very jammy kind of guy. I do a lot of melodic runs, that kind of stuff. And I go for those kind of older, vintage, fatter tones. Mm-hmm. And it really works well in the acoustic setting. Because it's really up to me now. If you'll notice in all those songs, the percussion's a lot more sparse.
Okay.
There's a lot of air, a lot of space involved. So for me, I'm the one holding up the low end now. I'm kind of keeping the movement going underneath a lot.
And let me ask you, in that regard, do you feel as a rhythm section, you and the drummer are kind of locked in with each other?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where you have to really be locked in, because, it's a funny thing. When you're playing a million miles an hour, we're playing thrash or whatever, really heavy stuff. there's so little space that you can just go plowing along and it feels tight. Man, when all of a sudden it's a slowed down tempo and it's really naked, you got to really be on with each other.
Yeah. And I was I was curious as far as your bass style. Do you play with a pick or your fingers, or does it kind of depend on the song? I mean, I've seen guys that play with their fingers like almost till they bleed.
No, that's kind of me. I'm a finger player. I always have been. When I was growing up, Steve Harris, Geezer Butler, Eddie Lee, those were like, those were the guys who made me want to play bass. So I've always been a finger player. I can play with a pick in the studio. I don't ever do it live. I'm terrible at it live, so I just don't bother. But no, mostly just I've been a finger style guy. It's a very 70s kind of thing. I'm not, I'm a little more free flowing, a little more movement in my bass lines.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything they put out yet, but one thing I'm excited about is I hear Geezer Butler and Matt Storm are forming some new band together.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I have no idea what that'll all end up sounding like, but I love Geezer's bass playing, so it can't suck. I can tell you that much.
I'd love to hear him do something, kind of outside of the Sabbath realm, if you will. Kind of, I think playing with a guy like Matt Storm, it's got to, be somewhat of a different vibe there. So that's going to be kind of interesting.
Well, it's always an interesting thing when you have a guy like I can relate because I'm the same type of bass player. Geezer just plays from the hip.
Yeah.
You can tell he never really ever plays those Sabbath songs exactly the same way every time when in the jammy parts.
Yeah.
And when you're going to play with a guy like that, you tend to fall in like it just becomes a little more 70s-ish. What you do.
Now let me ask you, from a bass player's perspective, one of my all-time favorite Sabbath tunes was Nativity in Black. I was curious if you guys have done a version of that, or?
Oh, we would do it in the tribute, and I love doing wah-wah bass.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because you probably heard that I do that little wah intro on War Pigs.
Yeah.
The Blacklight, and I do the same thing with the Scorpions talk box solo. That's me on bass. And
now, in regards to the Scorpions tune, is that a difficult thing to do, that talk box thing?
It was interesting. It was challenging because it's such the talk box is such a distinct part of that song. And I have a lot of different wahs, and one of my favorites is I have this Morley bass wah that really gets a real clack 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 kind of wah sound. And I found when I put an Electro-Harmonix Octaver on it, I could get really close, just making it sound talk boxes. So I use different effects and whatnot on the bass, and I just went for it.
Wow.
I had to sit and study it a minute to try to really translate it to bass. But afterwards, the guys kind of looked at me and go, "Well, that's different." Well, that's really kind of along the lines of what we're trying to do. Is just if it's different and unique, then hey, let's go for it.
And like I mentioned earlier in the interview, I heard your great version of Hellion Electric Eye. Talk a little bit about the recording of that, because again, that's always been one of my favorite Priest songs, but I love the fact that you guys kind of didn't go for obvious choice, like doing a version of Living After Midnight or Breaking the Law. Talk a little bit about your decision to cover that one and what that experience was like recording.
Well, with that one, I think it was Mike who actually came up with the first initial idea on that. And as we started doing it, Gary, the percussionist, started doing at the very beginning the thing with the hit it with the tambourine, and we all kind of looked at each other and laughed and go, "Man, this is like the good, the bad, and the ugly." And I'm like, "This is like Clint Eastwood meets the metal god," and that's what we went for. We're like, "Wow, that was such a cool vibe."
Yeah.
And we just started doing that. I have again, I told you I have a lot of effects pedals, and there's a really cool effect that all that kind of dark sounding stuff is actually my bass.
Oh wow.
Bass.
Wow.
And that kind of added to that whole spaghetti western vibe. And from there we just went with it. We thought, you know what, this is kind of cool. A little Spanish guitar, a little, kind of make these things a little slowed down, a little interesting. And when we were said and done with it, I was like, I wasn't really even sure if we'd be able to do that on acoustic. And when we were done, we're like, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How do we come up with that?
Yeah, and outside of talking about a band like Iron Maiden, typically, when you're talking about songs that are, metal songs originally, a lot of it is based around, the guitar. I love the fact that, like you're saying, when you went in to record that it was so centered around the bass, and just doing it that way makes it so drastically different than what the original version was.
Well, it's just funny on that. I don't know that I would say it was always centered around the bass, because really, like, I think Mike came up with just some brilliant parts, but I'd gotten that effect pedal, and I was like, wow, I think I got a tone that I got the cool effect that I think will really accentuate what we're doing right there. And once I put it on, everybody kind of looked at you and they go, wow, that's cool. Yeah. It's, again, it's being experimental. Everybody's being experimental. Nothing's, there's no rules.
Yeah.
You can do whatever the hell you want. Let's try it. If it sounds good, great. If it doesn't, we'll move on. And that's another good example of that, I think.
And I think probably why you guys have been so successful with this, not just because it's something you're doing from the heart and it started out as a fun project, but it seems like there's really no ego involved, in the sense that, like just sitting here talking to me about the recordings of the songs and stuff, you're telling me, oh, it's not just me, that, the singer and everybody else is involved, and it's a democratic thing, and we're all involved, and it's all, everybody kind of brings something to the table. When you got a band like that versus, one guy telling everybody what to do, I think that makes it that much more of a fun project,
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. Nobody, in this kind of thing, there's a lot of mutual respect with everybody in the room anyway, because we're all friends to start out with.
Yeah, and you're obviously the bass player, so let me ask you, Chris, a little bit about your personal story. How old were you when you first started playing the bass? I always love to ask guys, in your case, why did you choose the bass as your instrument of choice there?
Well, I started probably around 14 years old. And originally, it's funny, you always start out with buddies in a bedroom. and I had a couple good buddies that they were the guys who introduced me to music, John and Jeremy Graves. And, the playing, and I was just enthralled the minute I heard those guys. They've been playing for like a year or so before when I met them, and I was it was blown away that I could hear these songs being played on a guitar in front of me. And
wow.
I ended up having a real kind of natural knack for it, but it was really, I was kind of more or less playing guitar, and Jeremy was playing bass, and I had a really kind of crazy circumstance happen to me. I got shot.
Oh, wow.
In a hunting accident.
Wow.
Right through my left arm, and at the time in high school, I've always been a good athlete, and I was super into basketball. I was hoping to maybe go play small college basketball somewhere. And when I got shot, I ended up having nerve damage, and it took about a year to recover. And it was in between my at that point, my junior and senior year. And that is actually what got me. I kind of knew the basketball thing was out the door.
Wow.
Which was fine, whatever. But I picked up the bass. I had switched to bass probably not even but a couple months before this accident happened. And really it was the bass that was my rehab once my nerves started reawakening, because I lost use of my hand.
Wow.
Close to a year. But that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was getting shot, because I became a really, really serious musician from it.
Wow.
And I found that was my calling. Once I started playing the bass, I have really big hands. I'm kind of a big guy.
Wow, what an interesting journey there. Everybody's got their own little story, but kind of a Tony Iommi connection in the sense of Black Sabbath became what it did because that guy cut off the tips of two of his fingers, and that's what people say kind of led to what became the original metal sound, if you will, that everybody else is trying to copy these days. If he had not had that injury, who knows what he would have done, or Black Sabbath might have been a totally different type of band. But it's just amazing that music could be a therapy for you like that after suffering injury, and then look what you've gone on to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fatalist. I believe that things happen to people for a reason, and that clearly happened to me for a reason. And after that, it's been an awesome thing. Music is. I've got to see most of the world playing music.
Wow.
And that's the way I've kind of wanted to see the world. So it's worked out.
And I love it. I love, that you could have that attitude, after suffering something like that. Like, basically, I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm going to keep doing what I do and prosper. And it seems like you have. Now, other obvious question. Have you guys given any thoughts to because you have recorded these other songs since you put out the Reborn CD? So, what's the thought as far as a next CD? Would it be maybe doing a Scorpions tune, a Judas, like a cover from different bands? And then I was curious if eventually, do you ever see, since you guys are capable of doing original stuff, do you ever think you would start writing your own original music or covering it or writing your own tunes to throw in the set as well?
I fully believe we'll end up writing, original material. I do songwriting, contract songwriting, a little bit for a living, as part of my living as well.
Oh, wow.
Everybody can write.
Yeah.
It's eventually going to end up happening with us.
Yeah.
And for future releases of what we're doing, we've talked about it. It's a fun thing because there's so much you can do. We could completely do, even a mini, say, EP of just Scorpions.
Yeah. That's
songs. Or we can just do a mishmash of, just random songs on a record. I actually too am still a believer in I like putting collections of songs together.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
In album form, I just don't believe in that. I'm not really the singles guy.
Yeah.
So I think we would do all the above, and it's the great thing about having a studio and being able to produce all this stuff is we kind of have our own little machine where we can just jump in, record songs, and put them out.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that you're able to do that as a result of the internet. I mean, a few years before the internet existed, you might not have been able to have this kind of success so fast, and it's great that you can kind of do something like this at your own pace. And that's the very reason I was asking, because I was thinking, you could just continue to release a song or two at a time on YouTube, and then once you get enough songs together to put out another CD, you can do that. And I could see the fan base growing.
Oh, absolutely, and that's really what we're going to do. We'll just kind of keep on keeping on and do stuff as we go.
And then the next obvious question is, when you guys perform live, I was curious, for example, the songs on the Reborn CD, do you play them note for note the way they're on the CD, or being that it's a live experience, a live show, do you kind of jam the songs out a little more than they are on the record, or what's the process?
It's a little bit of both. We leave space there for going into new territory, jazz exploration, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But I know for me as a bass player, I never play a song twice the same way.
Cool. Yeah.
Maybe that thing. I don't know. I'm such a jammy bass player that I'm always doing something a little different. There's little things that you do that you kind of do every time because it's a very key melodic run or something. Mike's probably a little more methodic about playing what he played on the record.
Yeah.
Me not so much. I come from that Stevie Ray Vaughan thing of just play the songs, just whatever I'm feeling at the moment.
I love that because again, I'm a music fan. If I want to hear a record, I'll go home and put on my CD. But that's what made a band like Deep Purple so great back in the day when they had Blackmore and John Lord. When people tell me, keyboards suck, they don't belong in rock music, I say, you look what John Lord did to the keyboard. You listen to anything Deep Purple did, and then you go see them live. It was every song was a magical jam session on stage, extended 30 minutes. It was something you'd never seen before.
Oh yeah, man! I'm a huge Deep Purple fan, and I'm a fan of that kind of playing in general.
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you. I always wanted to go see bands, especially there's those certain songs that you know can just stretch, and you can do things with them, and you can hear these cool live versions.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
And now
by the way, don't be surprised if at some point you definitely hear a Deep Purple.
That was going to be my next question, because saying that you're such a huge Deep Purple fan, here's the thing with that is Deep Purple was such a jammy band, and most of their songs were real heavy. They had a few melodic songs, but like if you were to even on the top of your head like think about doing a Deep Purple track acoustic, what songs would you even consider? I mean, I would think maybe Mistreated might be one, but do you have any that you could think of?
Oh yeah, man. There's a couple I would think about. One of the ones I thought would be really cool is Perfect Strangers.
Oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah, and that's what.
Yeah, I thought Perfect Strangers would be super cool to do.
And that's what
I'm a big fan of like both Purple and Rainbow from that era. And there's I wouldn't be surprised too. You know, we're Rainbow fans. There'll definitely be a Rainbow song thrown in at some point too. Matter of fact, we kind of worked at one point on a little version of Stone Cold.
Oh wow! I could see that. Wow, and you know,
again, you know, we just kind of you jump in and you think, okay, well, how are we going to do that?
Yeah.
and we'll see what happens. But yeah, for sure. There's so much stuff. I think the really fun part of it too is trying to think about how to do a song that's completely not obvious.
Yeah.
Like, or you know, kind of like what we did with the Priest song.
Yeah.
A lot of people who've heard it have told me, go like, dude, I would have never thought of that song being done in manner.
And it's funny
that's very gratifying.
It's funny you mentioned
like, really take something that's so like heavy or fast or whatever, and then turn it into something else.
Yeah, and it's funny because just as we sit here talking, I was thinking about Judas Priest as you brought them up again, and the thing I was just thinking, it would be so cool. I could see like you guys doing something like an acoustic version of like the Metal God, but maybe revamping it the Acoustic God or something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's the sky's the limit of what you can do. I mean we've been talking about what Iron Maiden songs we can do. We've been talking about Metallica songs. I mean there's just so much of what you can possibly do, and we'll just see where it goes. I know right now we're actually entering a point in time where we're expanding the repertoire a lot over the next 2 to 3 months, probably by another 10 songs or so.
And so let me ask you, you guys perform, I know, a lot live, but what's the point when you start thinking, okay, it's time to start recording some new tunes? Like, do you just kind of record them as you get the ideas, or?
Yeah, when we kind of do, what we'll end up doing is Mike and I usually get together and do jam sessions, and we'll just record what we're doing and go. We're spitballing, and that kind of is the genesis. If we go, well, okay, we can do it musically. Let's see what Kevin sounds like, and then we have Kevin, put his 2 cents in on it, and we kind of go from there and see if it builds. And
then you mentioned that you also, from time to time, play in Wild Mick Brown's solo band. Now, when you guys are doing that, are you guys kind of playing a lot of Dokken material, or what's the set list like for that?
It's a mix. It kind of relies heavily on Dokken and Lynch Mob, but there's some Montrose and some Ted Nugent in there too.
Oh wow!
It's basically all the bands that Mick has played in over the years.
Oh wow! Okay. Now I know he's getting ready to go do this band with Robert Mason and George and Jeff. Have you heard any of that?
I've heard a little bit of it, and from what I heard, it was really cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that. And so, before we wrap this up, you mentioned you were part of some other bands. Do you want to name drop any of those bands, or?
I mean, over the years, I've played in Marty Friedman's solo band.
Oh wow, what's that been like? I mean, he's a monster on the guitar.
Oh, Marty's, he was always, before I ever knew Marty, was one of my favorite guitar players, and And once I met Marty and became friends with Marty, you know, it was just always an amazing thing. Getting to play with him. And it's funny, in Razor, the guitar player there we played with was Jordan Ziff, who's now the guitar player in Rat.
Wow.
Also plays with Marty now.
Wow.
Hooked him up with Marty. So, so we're just, you know what? It's always like the 6 degrees of separation. Music is like two.
Yeah, there you go. And you know, Marty Friedman, from what I understand, besides just being an overall amazing guitar player, I understand he's incredibly an intelligent guy in the sense that, I mean, for several years now, I understand he's moved entirely over to Japan. He's immersed himself in the culture and the language, and he's gone, you know, he's well versed in, from what I understand, Japanese culture, and he can speak it pretty well.
Oh yeah,
it's just amazing to hear what a guy could do that, you know, who's born here in the United States.
A DVD, when was this, in 2007, I think it was, where we went to Japan and recorded this live DVD over there. And I really got to see at that point firsthand exactly how huge Marty was there.
Now he recently released a live album. This DVD you're talking about, does that have anything to do with the current release he has out?
That one, it has Jordan on it.
Oh, okay.
Which is cool. I mean, it's you know, Marty's, you know, constantly doing different things.
Yeah.
And you know, he's really kind of made a concerted effort to jump back into his solo career in the past, say, 3 years or so. Whereas when I was in the band, he was really concentrating on TV. So we would go do a whole lot of dates in a real small period of time, and then wouldn't hear anything for a long time. Then we'd go do it again.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
But now Marty, I think, is kind of coming back into making music a little bit more of his priority career-wise again, which was a funny thing to say because you don't think of Marty as, here in America, you don't think of Marty as anything more than really a guitar player. But in Japan, he was and has been, you know, a really big personality.
I understand he's almost become part of the pop culture, if you will. Like you said, for years, people haven't heard anything from here in America until just recently, the last couple of years. He's kind of revamping his solo career. He's at that point where he doesn't necessarily do the work because he has to. I mean, he's probably at the point in life where he doesn't really have to do it, but and he's more popular, like you said, in Japan, but he's kind of having a resurgence here, and that's kind of a cool thing to be at the point where, you know, instrumental music, to put out that type of music, you know, you got to be a guy like Marty or, you know, Steve Vai or Joe Satriani, where, you know, each song kind of stands on its own, and that's what these guys do, and it's amazing that, look at what these guys can do with the guitar, and have a, you know, it's all instrumental without vocals, so that takes a certain level of talent to be able to keep somebody's attention with that, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Marty's really good at it. It's really funny because he would be really disconnected from America for a long time.
Yeah.
We would talk, and I would tell him, you know, well, this is kind of what's going on over here. This is happening, and he would be the first to say, man, I'm so disconnected. I don't see it. And I would tell him, I was like, man, you know, you have a following still here. Like, you're playing, man. I said, you kind of passed over into this realm of guitar legend. And I said, you should really come and do more stuff in America. And I've been telling him this for a while. And then I think he finally, it just kind of, the timing in his career worked out where he was getting more time to actually play music. He decided to jump back into it, and I'm glad he has.
It's amazing. A lot of these guys like Marty and you know, they get to the point where they're more popular in other countries. I mean, you even take a band like Mr. Big with Billy Sheehan and that, and they are so much more popular in Japan. For example, they became a band that they could do like 4 or 5 shows a year in Japan, and they would make bank for a year. You know.
Yeah. They completely can, man. I mean, the Japanese market's great for that. I mean, Mick did the same thing with Dokken. You know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, whatever that was. They went over there, and it was, the Japanese fans are just ravenous.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've heard
good rock music. You know?
I've heard not just in Japan, but Europe. They seem to treat their their metal bands with a lot more respect than a lot of Americans here do.
Well, the interesting thing when you go to Europe and you tour in Europe, you kind of come to understand that it's a generational thing that's passed down. The music is.
Yeah.
You know, I would go and play. I remember I was in a metal blade act called War Dog.
Oh wow!
And this was back in the mid to late '90s. And first time I ever went to Europe, the thing that struck me right away is that we would see kids at shows ranging from 14 to like, you know, their grandparents in the 60s.
Wow.
And you realize that music they just took their music far more serious. It was generational, you know, kind of passed down.
Yeah.
And they liked the newer stuff as much as they liked the older stuff. And I think, you know, in America, say in the past several years, you're starting to see rock music become more generational here.
I agree. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who grew up in the 70s and 80s who've had kids, and their kids are at the point of having kids, and they were all, you know, they're still real, you know, ardent music fans.
Uh-huh. Wow. And now, before we wrap this up, I want to ask you, Chris, being that you're a guy that's played with Marty Friedman over the years, when you do a gig like that where it's all, like I was saying, just strictly instrumental music, that's got to be a different type of gig, even compared to what you're doing with, you know, Blacklight Acoustic Conspiracy, because, you know, you like right now you're singing tunes that got vocals, but when you're up there on stage and it's all instrumental music, that's got to be pretty intense. I mean, what's that like playing a gig like that?
Oh, it's crazy.
I'd imagine you got to be really paying attention to what note you got your fingers on, and it's a lot more.
It's a funny thing, man. Yeah, because it's all about like this technical music playing.
Yeah.
One of the hardest parts of this is like, it's not me. I'm really not a big instrumental music fan, and what I do think of instrumental music, like I'm a fan of, say, like the Scorpions' Coast to Coast.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite instrumentals. It's so much like a song.
Yeah.
With just the guitar lines being the vocals. But you know, in Marty's band, it was really about, you know, the playing and you know, kind of getting your shred on it. And it is a little intense, man. It was a little daunting depending on the crowd, too, because, you know, it's a funny thing walking out on stage and everybody's looking at your hands.
Yeah.
Like just their eyes are glued to what you're doing.
Yeah. Because there's something to be said for being technically precise, but then on the flip side, I love players that just get up there and kind of jam and do their thing, you know. And the kind of, you know, Steve Vai is another good example, kind of like Marty Friedman. I mean, if you heard what he did on the David Lee Roth song Yankee Rose, how he made that guitar talk. I mean, even that was such a big part of that song, you know. So when you talk about players like that, that's why they're able to kind of pull people's, you know, attention, and why it's not so boring just to hear them do their instrumental songs, you know.
Yeah, and then Marty's gig, he tends to try to rock it up a little bit more. A lot of people don't realize this, but Marty's a really big punk rock fan.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I wouldn't have thought so.
The Ramones were one of his favorite bands.
Yeah.
And he, if you start really listening to some of his instrumental stuff, you hear the punk rock influence in it. Yeah. You hear the downpicking, the fast downpicking stuff. It's there. Yeah,
because it's kind of funny. I was reading the other day an interview Dave Mustaine was doing where he's talking about the Megadeth album Risk, and he's saying a lot of popular direction on that album he blames on Marty, or rather was his influence.
Well, you know, I think that all those guys at that time, I've known that whole camp for a long time, and at that point in time, they were all, they were, you know, times were changing.
Yeah.
And Marty wanted to go do other things without fail at that point. And he did, and I think it worked out for everybody.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And then before we wrap this up, I want to ask you, in regards to the gig with Mick Brown, although I know you guys do Dokken and Montrose and Lynch Mob stuff, has there been any discussion that, hey, let's go on a do a CD or something together, even if it's just a remake of those songs, or maybe let's try to do an original CD? Has there ever been any talk of that?
You know, we kicked the idea around with Mick. Mick's the kind of guy who I think he just wanted to go have fun, and he's been playing drums for a lot of years.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And,
yeah.
And a lot of the times, I think he's got some other things in mind of what he'd like to do beyond playing drums.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
and so really the thing with his band has been, go out and play some songs. I know.
Just have some fun.
I wouldn't be surprised if we did some original music with him. I wouldn't be surprised if we never did.
Oh, there you go. Kind of up in there. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of cool. You got.
Mick's a great guy, man. He's a real hoot to be around and play with, and it's just that gig's a lot of fun with him, because it's just, we're out there flying by the seat of our pants doing these a lot of the times, and it's just fun. And I
got to ask, when you're playing with him, being the bass player, do you ever take the lead vocal on "Just Got Lucky"?
No, we have a great singer. So I'm happy to just go up there and croon my little high girly parts and call it a day. There you go.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you, Chris. So I'll tell you what, maybe we can do this again down the line. I'd like to maybe get a copy of a CD, and then maybe we could do a follow-up interview talking specifically about, the songs on